Hello, Decluttering Club. Sarah Mueller here. And today we have a very exciting, very special topic that I think is going to be relevant to so many of you all. Today we're talking about decluttering with ADHD, or maybe ADD if you have that. If you have ADHD, if you would just drop an emoji in the comments to let us know, we would appreciate it. And by the way, this call is recorded, so we are recording this and then replaying it later on for you all. So I am here today with two of my decluttering coaches. We have Danie Smallwood and Julie Wobie. So Danie, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us why you are particularly interested in decluttering with ADHD.
Hi, I'm Danie Smallwood, and I found out very recently, I'm 43, and I found out I had some suspicions in the past few years, but in the past year, I actually got an official ADHD diagnosis. And it really clarified for me why many things, but decluttering in particular has been so challenging my entire life. And it's empowering in the sense that, wow, like this makes so much sense. This gives me access to ideas and tools that I didn't think of before. And it's hard in the sense that like I feel a sense of grief over 40 years of my life where I didn't know why these things were hard. I didn't know why it was hard for me. It didn't seem hard for anyone else. Nobody else understood that it was hard. And I struggled, and I would like to say unnecessarily. I think it should be unnecessary for everybody with ADHD to be struggling in the way that so many of us do because it's not understood. And so my purpose really in being a decluttering coach is to work with people who have ADHD or who just, might have symptoms that mimic ADHD and can benefit from very similar strategies and help them to find that empowerment, to find the curiosity and be able to transform their thinking and transform their home and, just have the life that they know that they were meant to have.
Oh, so good. Yes, I love it. I love it. So interesting that you were just recently diagnosed. Is that common for a lot of adults?
I see Julie nodding too, but
yeah,
it's extremely common. Adult ADHD. I mean, ADHD itself hasn't really been accepted for very long at all, like really only in the past few decades. And adult ADHD has been, I think officially was a thing maybe in like the late 90s, but even then it was like, it's probably an excuse. And it's like anything, it can be. You can use ADHD as an excuse, absolutely. Mm-hmm. But, there's always that question if it's something that everybody would find to be something that makes it impossible to do something, then yeah, it's an excuse. But if other people could make different choices, see a different way through, think about it differently, then maybe it's your thinking that's stopping you. And it's not just the ADHD has actually made it impossible.
Mm-hmm. So good. Okay, we're going to get into that for sure. But Julie, let's hear from you. Tell us what's your interest in ADHD?
Okay, first, that was beautiful. So my interest is similar in that I went through my life and I identified as a type A personality. So we talked about this. I don't think that I'm the norm, but then I realized that there's parts of my personality and parts of my coaching that lend themselves so beautifully to helping people with ADHD. I was diagnosed 2 years ago officially with ADD. So I'm turning 50 this year. So I'm a little bit older than Danielle. And it was a grieving process for sure. And I didn't know what it meant. And then I didn't know a lot about it either. I didn't really know anyone that had it. I always felt that I was different, but I think that's because people were always telling me I was different, but no one ever said to me, oh, you need to try harder, or you're disruptive or you're very hyper, they would say, oh, you're a lot, or you're really like taking another course. Like I'm continually improving myself. I'm continually trying new skills and stretching myself. And I think it's because I had no other choice. Like I knew when I was younger that I was different, but no one talked about it. Like in the 70s and 80s, girls did not have this. No one talked about it. And I just thought, oh, well, maybe because this happened or that happened, or maybe this is just the way I was meant. And then I was at work one day and I had to do this task that I did every week. And basically it's similar to this. I needed to go to a computer. I needed to turn on the computer. I needed to start a meeting so the whole team could come to the meeting. And then I would run the meeting. And every single week I needed to have notes, but sometimes I couldn't find where I wrote the note. So then I would go and ask a kind coworker, and no one ever stopped to ask me like, why? And I just kept telling myself that I was not as smart as everyone else. I didn't belong. Why do I have this role? Because I couldn't do it. And I think that for me, the biggest part of my diagnosis was having this tool to let me know why I thought the way I did and why I did things. So the strongest indicator in all my tests was that I'm emotional and I take rejection very, very badly. And both of you guys probably don't know because I haven't really shown that. And there's this thing that you have that's kind of like masking. Like we have this view that we share to the world. And then when we're really comfortable, or if we're so overwhelmed and so tired, the other part comes out. But we're constantly trying to prove ourselves or work that much harder so that it doesn't appear that we're different. And so I think, actually, I know the reason why I wanted to be part of this call was to let people know that it's okay. And that there are people that understand and that want to work with you and that will hold space for you. And being different doesn't mean that we're wrong. And I think that the more that we learn about it and the more that people talk about it, we can share what works for us and we can help each other. I was sharing earlier that Danielle and myself, like she has this one way that she talks about habits and that really works. And I talk about self-care. And when we first met each other, we were like, oh, I don't know about this. Like, I don't think this is going to work. And now knowing each other for over a year, I'm incorporating habits and she's incorporating self-care. So we kind of feed off each other.
So you guys flipped, like you flipped where you were focusing. Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's so fun. Okay. So you guys are both decluttering coaches. So this is a really big question, right? So not a question that really can be answered in 5 or 10 minutes, but why is decluttering so hard if you have ADHD in particular? Like decluttering is hard for lots of reasons, right? But what do you think makes it just that much harder if you do have ADHD? What are your thoughts about that? I don't know which one of you wants to go first on that. Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to kind of break it down into like 4 pieces. Okay. Really quick. So we start off, you have just the neurobiological kind of like aspect of ADHD. Like ADHD brains are literally different than a neurotypical brain. Okay. And it's really no different than like if somebody has type 1 diabetes, their pancreas functions differently. Okay. Our brains function differently. That's a factual thing. It doesn't change just because we want it to or because we develop better strategies, right? Part 2 of the things that are affected are working memory. And that includes things like, you're decluttering. Let's say you're working on decluttering your living room and you pick up an empty coffee mug and to take it into the kitchen. But as you're walking into the kitchen, you notice that your dog bowl's empty. You're like, oh, my dog has no water. And so you put the cup down, obviously, to go get, some water for your dog. You get some water for your dog. While you're in the bathroom, you realize, oh my God, there's no toilet paper. So you go get the toilet paper. And, 45 minutes later, you've made your bed. And, the mug is still sitting somewhere in no man's land, right? And this isn't obvious. I mean, you can see why this makes it very hard to actually declutter. Now, it's important to know that everybody does this. Everybody has moments when they do this. People with ADHD do this almost every time they try to do anything. And when they don't do it, they're working so hard not to do it. It might not be visible, but they're working so freaking hard to keep that thought in their head, to complete that task that and I'm going to say neurotypical, there's really no such thing, but we need words, right? So like a neurotypical brain might just have to like be like, oh yeah, I'm taking it into the kitchen. Look, I put it in the sink. Big deal.
Yeah.
But it is a big deal. Anytime I make it to a sink with that mug all the way from the living room, that wasn't actually a big deal.
So it's like it's like the stereotypical, if you give a mouse a cookie, he does this and then he does that, but it's like that all the time. And you're saying that's not even really an exaggeration. That's just normal.
It really isn't. And even if it doesn't go that far, I mean, you take like 5 steps and might just look down and be like, why am I holding a coffee mug? Was I going to get more coffee? What?
Right.
And just the amount of extra mental energy, like every time we try to make a decision during our day, that's using up energy. And we have a limited amount. Like sleeping gives us our energy back, but it's not infinite, right? So trying to remember why we're holding that coffee mug, there went a little bit more of our energy that other people are using for big creative thoughts and challenging things like making dinner or whatever. The other part is the executive functioning in our brains. And I keep looking down because I have notes, because if I don't have notes, I don't know what I'm talking about. So I'm sorry, guys. And this plays a big role in decluttering and things like delaying gratification, right? It's hard to say I'm not going to watch TV right now for anybody who wants to sit and watch TV or play a video game. It's really, really, really hard when you have ADHD. Okay. It is hard to plan ahead. It is hard to break down a task. Like these are things that aren't easy necessarily for any brain. They're really hard for most people with ADHD. And again, that falls under the executive functioning parts of our brain. Then those parts of our brain that are not functioning, as simply as they are for other people, are creating this visual chaos around us. Our brains, it's called ADHD, attention deficit disorder, which is silly because for the vast majority of people with ADHD, we have an overload of attention. We're paying attention to everything. And even if you don't realize it, all the things out on your table are taking a little part of your attention. Guess what attention is? It's also energy. And that's also coming from that finite supply of energy you have during the day. All right. So now we have our brain kind of working against us, fact of life. We have our environment is now working against us. And then we throw in other people who happily come in and they're like, why are you so lazy? Why can't you just do that? It's not that hard. Just devote some extra time during the day. Just turn off your computer and do the task. Right? Like that's all you have to do. Like, oh, well, thank you. Super.
Oh, there we go. That was the magic
answer. The reality is
that
might be all one person with ADHD has to do. But that's not going to work for somebody else. Right? It's true for everything. Again, that everybody is different, but people with ADHD, what works for one person just doesn't work for the next person. It just isn't that simple. It makes it very hard to write books about how to declutter with ADHD. It makes it hard to make a video about how to declutter with ADHD, to make a top 10 list. It makes it hard to do these things. But the end result of all of this, we've got our brain, we've got our environment, we've got other people, and now we have our self-talk. And anytime anything goes wrong, our brain has learned to say, my God, what a failure you are. Why can't you do anything right? Why? It's not that hard. How do we know this? Because everyone has told us this since we were little kids. So we know it has to be true. And often, especially for women, because we often are not struggling as much with the executive functioning stuff. That's how most people are caught. Like the ADHD is caught early. For a lot of people, that's the oh, they couldn't sit still. They couldn't get their homework done. They were failing in 3rd grade, right? A lot of women in particular with ADHD get PhDs, with great grades, but nobody sees how hard it was, what they had to do to get there, right? And that self-talk doesn't go away. And I think that the biggest challenge, in lieu of sort of a top 10, and I can come up with 10 great ways to declutter with ADHD, right? But I think that the biggest thing that I like to tell people is that we live in a world that, other people have created for us, but we live in a place of shame and judgment a lot of the time. And we really need to live in a place of curiosity and just like calm determination, because there are ways to make things easier. There's ways to simplify things. There's ways to make the day go better, to make those keys not disappear every single time we walk through the door, right? These things can actually happen for us, but they might not be the way that one person said, that, somebody suggested in a book or a, YouTube video. And so we have to stay curious. The fact that we try something and it doesn't work, it doesn't mean that we failed. It means that that wasn't a suggestion that resonates with our brain. So we just have to stay curious and willing to try the next thing. We gained information. Guess what? Cook by the door, not the strategy for me.
So good. So good.
Thanks
Oh
for
my
coming
gosh,
to my
I love
TED
it.
Talk.
You dropped so many knowledge
Yes.
bombs there. That was so good. Julie, what do you want to add on to that?
So I will need to rewatch. So one of the things, and if you are watching this and you have ADD or ADHD, you might have even seen this happening in my brain on my face. So I have a million tabs open. I have all these thoughts, all these ideas. I wanted to interrupt so many times, and I probably will during this. And you could also ask me, what did you say 2 minutes ago? And I wouldn't be able to tell you, because we spend all our time trying not to interrupt, trying to be good, trying to be kind, trying to do the right thing, when we're so worried that we're going to forget what we said, and we think it has value and we want to add to the conversation. But then we have these conflicting voices in our head. Then if you take it one step further, so I identify with this wholeheartedly, that I have this all or nothing thinking, which I have worked really hard over the past 2 years to reverse, because I know that it doesn't serve me. But anything that I need to do, it's almost as if I'm planning a project for every task I need to do. Like, I'll use the simplest one. Some of us have kids. So you think about, okay, how am I going to get my child from bed to school? And I will think of every single step that it takes to get to that end goal. Add in a child that is diagnosed with ADHD. They're also doing the same thing. Sometimes your brain gets so exhausted from trying to think of all the steps that are needed to take to walk through the school doors that you just can't. Then anxiety kicks in, because you think of everything that could go wrong, everything that you need to do, and it just seems so much. And then you start, just like Danielle said, you start asking yourself, why is this so hard for me? Why does everyone else find it so easier? And so I think that's when what I learned is adding self-care into my day works. And it works in many different ways. Like, the simplest one would be, I don't like to take out the recycling or the garbage. I don't like unloading the dishwasher. They're tasks I don't like. But the fact is, I'm a mom. I need to do these things. If I don't do them, no one is going to do them. And so I've tried all the things, all the suggestions that everyone has told me. And the thing that works for me is I've now identified that as a self-care need for me. So if I take out the recycling, the man or the woman, whoever is going to come and pick up the recycling, will be able to pick it up. It won't be in my hallway. I won't get frustrated when I walk in there. It won't be overflowing, and then I'm going to get frustrated, and then I'm going to start this whole cycle again of negative self-talk. So by that switch, by telling myself the things that I need to do as an adult, or as the main provider in our home, or the person that does all the things, is identify it as a self-care need. And that has been working for me for months. And that might not work for someone else, but it definitely has taken away the not wanting to do it, getting overwhelmed, saying to myself, well, why doesn't someone else do it? Why do I have to do it? Because we're holding everything. And my brain is like, I don't want one more thing. Another example is when someone asks us a question, like, what do you want to eat? it seems like a very simple question. It is so hard. Like, what do you mean? I don't know. I don't know how I'm gonna feel. I don't like, and
I
then
burst into tears at least once a week when somebody asks me that
yes,
question.
like,
Like,
and
why?
it
I
seems
can't,
so
like my brain
simple.
doesn't have space.
No, it doesn't. I'm like, I wake up and I think, could someone just make those decisions for me? Because it feels like we're making a trillion decisions a day when everyone else is making 5. And then the last one would be,
So like all the decisions that you need to make when you're decluttering are literally like exhausting you in a
oh
way
yeah,
that they wouldn't really exhaust me. Like I could make 100 decisions. I'd be like, it's a lot of work. But for you all, you're saying like, this is so much more work.
oh yes. And then you might remember this, Sarah, when I first joined, before I was a coach, and I did the 5-day organized like a boss challenge, if anyone doesn't know what that is. And I would say, I'm going to toot my own horn. I would say I was a rock star in that. Like I embraced it. I was doing everything that you asked. I was doing more, because the other thing that we do is we have this ability to hyper focus on one thing. And I was like, this is incredible. No one's ever told me this before. I'm going to do my whole entire house. And then I got exhausted, and you didn't see me for a month because I burnt myself out totally. And I thought, I can't make one more decision. I can't declutter one more thing. I didn't even want to maintain my space. So that is another thing that we struggle with, and impulse control. Like part of the reason that I need to declutter is because I need to get that rush. So, if anyone's on TikTok, you scroll TikTok and it's like a new thing, a new thing, a new thing, a new thing. And so it's activating your brain. It's the same with shopping. It's the same now for me with white spaces, which is the idea of, I don't see all the things. I just white. So that helps calm my brain. But I didn't know that before. I just knew that I needed to do things and I needed to do it now. And I thought everyone else did that. And then I was talking to a friend and she's like, no, I don't just buy every single thing that I feel like it, or I don't just sign up for that course, or I don't just decide to take everything out of my kitchen and put it all on the counter and then get so exhausted that I can't put it away. Because other people know that, okay, let's do it 10 minutes at a time. Let's ask a friend to help. Actually, I would say the biggest thing that I would want someone that is decluttering with ADHD or ADD is to find someone that you trust that you can ask for help. Because for so long, we are taught that we're doing things wrong, or we need to do it better, or we're failing. And so we don't want to ask for help because we're scared. We're scared of what the person is going to say. We're scared we're going to be judged. We're scared that we're going to feel shame, overwhelm, whatever it is. And I find that the fact that I started decluttering with one of my best friends, and I trusted her and she trusted me, and we could ask each other and we could help each other stay accountable and rein things in when it was getting too overwhelming. And that is something that I never knew that I could ask someone, because I always felt like I had to do it myself.
So like working with a coach, or at least having a safe space, someone that you can ask these questions, you might think this is a silly question, but it's so valuable to be able to ask that kind of thing and get some input. Yeah. Oh, that's so good. That's so good.
Yeah,
okay. So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm like, it's funny because when I started coaching, I did kind of the traditional model that most people, I say most people as though this is a big thing, but that kind of most coaching or therapy kind of models are based on like, one session a week, right? And this is obviously a tried and true method in a lot of ways. But what I have found is that people with ADHD, it's, people say they're impulsive as though it's a bad thing. And, when it turns out that you've bought 17 things at 3 a.m. on Amazon and you don't have anywhere to put them or any way to pay for them, then that's
or you don't
probably
remember
not a great thing.
When it shows up.
Well, someday I'll tell you the stroller story that showed up 2 days later. That I was just like, I think I remember possibly looking at that stroller. Anyway, my 15-year-old was like, Mom, seriously? I'm like, okay, anyway, we don't have to talk about it right now. But I literally have no idea what I was just talking about. What was I talking about?
Impulsiveness.
Impulsiveness.
Right. So like, but it's not like, there's ways to also make that work for you. So like when I work with clients where ADHD is like a big factor, I encourage them. I have a different package that has a texting throughout the month, feature. And the idea is that like you can text me literally any time of the day. So if you have like this inspiration at 3 a.m., you don't have to try to like write a note and remember to bring it up when we talk on Thursday at 10 a.m. You can just text me right then and there. And that's fine. And that's like, we've created those boundaries. That's space that we've created. So you're not interrupting me. It's, like that's just the way it's set up, because then you're not fighting one more urge, because that can work. And then, like I
Yeah.
respond like when it's an appropriate time for me. And it's
When
like,
you can.
and
I think
then
that's so genius, right? Because you're not fighting the impulsiveness, or, like if someone's hyper focused at 3 a.m. and they're ready to declutter, they don't have to like hold on to that and like try and postpone that until
right.
Thursday
And
at 2,
and,
right?
not everybody with ADHD has the hyper focus,
Mhm.
which okay, I will honestly say it makes me a little sad. Like that's one of my favorite things about having
Yeah.
ADHD. It's not
How fun.
convenient in the slightest, and it doesn't work at all with having kids who have like schedules and want to eat and things like that. So that's pretty disappointing. But I wanted to say something about Julie and I feel like we've touched on this, but I just want to say something about perfectionism,
Yes.
because again, people with ADHD are seen so often as being scattered and lazy and like never quite finishing the work, or just, not being as attentive to details and stuff. But actually, I think if you really broke it down, people with ADHD by and large tend toward perfectionism. It's part of why they procrastinate so badly, because it's so hard when realistically that it's going to be so hard to meet your own standards. It's just like one more barrier to actually getting started when you already have so many barriers up. And there's just so many myths out there that are just so damaging and hurtful. And both to people who have ADHD and to people who are living with people who have ADHD.
Mhm.
Helping them understand like how do I help them? How do I talk to them in a way that's like helpful and not, making them feel worse, or,
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. So how do we? What do you think? How? And let's bring this specifically to decluttering. Like how can someone with ADHD, or maybe even someone who's living with someone with ADHD, what are some strategies that they can use to to make progress instead of just beating themselves up and like wondering why it looks so easy for everybody else? Why is it hard for me? What can people do there?
So I would say to use the diagnosis to your advantage. So when someone gets diagnosed, or if your family member gets diagnosed, you research it and you know typically what people might be dealing with. So for me, I know that my brain does not remember anything. And I know that if I create a list, I'm going to lose it. So for me, I've created something in my home and I share with my clients, which I call Home Central, which is similar to your command center idea, Sarah, and basically for me, it's everything. And what I share with my clients is everything that we need to remember, everything that you need to run your home, to create routines and habits so that you can declutter, goes into this one place. And then we have different tips because everyone is different. So some people that I work with, they want me to, after we have an initial meeting, to come up with the plan and then keep them accountable to the plan. And I do a similar thing that they can message me or text me when they're working on it, which might not be during the hours when I'm open or when we have a call, but that way then they don't lose that. And then I ask them to remember to take it slow, be kind to themselves, and anticipate that there's going to be breakdowns, and that you're not always it's not going to go the way that you expect. But if we talk about that and we come up with ways to overcome those obstacles, it doesn't stop the process. and to also know that it could be longer. So for example, in the Home Central, for me, like we have weekly to-dos, things that just regular maintenance, things that we need to do to keep the house running, and then the places that we want to declutter. So the tip that's working the best for me right now, which I will share, and I brought them so that I can show you, is we're using these index cards. The index cards are very small. We establish a place where you're going to keep them, and then we put a note in our phone to remind us, because even though we might have talked about it, we will forget where we put it. And then the reason why I like this is because you write down, so I have them go through all the parts of their home and write down all the things that they would just wish to do in that space. And then we get it out of our brains, because that closes some of the tabs. And then, you know, okay, so I'm starting to have a plan. Then when we decide, we wake up, because let's be honest, we're not always motivated. And someone like me, if I waited to be motivated, it would never happen. So I know that I have my steps. I know that what I'm going to do. And then I just pull up a card. Maybe I'm going to work in the bathroom because that's what Julie put on the list. But I might wake up and say, no, I don't want to. So I just pull another card. I do something from that. And then I highlight it instead of crossing it out, because that shows our brains, oh, I did something good. And then they don't see, so they just see the pink or the purple or the yellow highlighting, and they know they accomplished something, and then they go on with their day. We definitely also use a timer and set for 10 minutes at a time or 30 minutes, whatever it is, and then we stop. And when we're first starting in the first week or two, I ask them to stick to that, just so that we can get into a routine and it becomes a habit, and it doesn't feel like one more thing that they need to do on their day. And when they start to get distracted and start to get overwhelmed, we've also put into plan some tools. So sometimes it might be stopping right there in that moment. And you guys know I like a gratitude, and just finding something that they're grateful for, because it brings them back into the moment. And it doesn't allow us to go down that train of like, oh my gosh, see, here's something else I tried. I have all these tools and it's still not working. The other thing that we put into the Home Central is, in the first or second time that we meet, I ask them, what is one thing that really stresses you? Or what is one thing that you're always losing? Or what is one thing that you wish was decluttered so that you didn't have to rebuy it? So for me, I was always losing papers, and important papers that I needed. And then when I needed the paper, I couldn't find it. My heart started racing. I started to get very stressed, and I started to go down the wrong path. So now I have in my kitchen, in a file folder, I have the papers that I need. I have them separated by season. So if it's something for outdoors, I bring it there for my filing cabinet in the summer. If it's something like, I don't know, like I could even lose garbage bags, being perfectly honest. So I try to have routines and homes for everything that we need. And as I'm decluttering, for me, and I know this isn't everyone, I know that some people don't like white space, but if I have white space, I know, okay, that's going to keep me calmer, because my brain isn't looking at every single one of those items and trying to process it. And that helps me declutter, because I know that I'm going to feel better if I have less. And so then I can release it. I try to take and share that our attachment to the items is sometimes something different than the item itself. It's sometimes a feeling that we had, or we associate our identity with that item. And so we try to go a little bit deeper. And for that reason, which is why I took a life coaching certification, because I felt like I was going a little bit outside of decluttering and helping on a life.
For sure. Yeah.
And label everything. Label, 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 because you will tell yourself that you will remember what you put in that box. I guarantee you will not. So I label, and I think those would be the easiest ones.
Those are some really helpful tips. Yeah, absolutely. I love the home central idea is so good. That's such a good concept for sure. Yeah. Danie, what are some of your like favorite strategies? I know you have a million.
I'm laughing about the home central because I have still never been able to implement that in my house. I've actually helped some clients do it. I have not been able to make it work.
And that kind of shows us
I
that
should probably
there's
work with Julie.
so much variety, right?
But
like what works
yes,
for one person isn't going to work for everybody. And that's
yeah,
totally
and
fine.
for the longest time, I was convinced that I had to do it. And I lost so much time because I just kept trying. I'm like, okay, well, I'll try this approach to it. I'll try this approach to it. Okay, well, it must be because I need to try it this way. Then it'll work. But no matter what I did, it doesn't work for me to have a physical location where we're putting all those things. But what we found that really makes a huge difference for us, and this is something that I would tell everybody who has ADHD and is like, what can I tell my husband or my partner or my friend or whoever they're interacting with daily, like that they could do to help me, is to know where can they give you information that you can process it. Right. And so, for example, like it's so easy for people to be like, hey, don't forget I have a meeting tomorrow night. And we've just gotten to a point where my response is it on Cozy, which is the family calendar system that we use? Like, because if the answer is no, then it doesn't matter that you just told me. Like it's, I still in the back of my head, I can hear myself saying, I mean, I know it should matter, but no, it shouldn't matter. Like, that's not how my brain works. I can't remember that. Or if I did, it would be at the cost of so many other things that my brain needs to be able to do. The cost is too high. And I don't think it's too high a price to ask for people who care about me to take 2 minutes and put it onto the calendar. And then, once it's on the calendar, then that's a whole different issue. We all have to learn to open the calendar and look at it. And yes, that took us a year or so of practice to do. Like, we didn't, calendars don't work great if you don't look at them. But, it's things like that. And like, I am extremely impulsive and work very well with hyperfocus, right? Those are two things that are very, very big for me. And if it suddenly occurs to me that I need the front hall clean, like I need it clean. Like, I know that I was about to make dinner, but like, I actually need the front hall clean. Like, the biggest thing my family can do to support me in decluttering is to say, you know what, why don't we order something in for dinner tonight and let you go do that? Because everybody wins. Like, the whole family ends up with a tidier space. Other people who didn't want to do any decluttering in there with me don't have to, because I'm in hyper-focus mode and I am more than happy to do it on my own. And, and all they had to do was just order food in or cook mac and cheese for themselves or whatever it is. Like, so it's just things like that, being able to kind of be flexible and pivot and just, but the problem is it starts with me understanding what does work for me. And so I couldn't tell people, how can you help me? Because I didn't know for the longest time. I just assumed I'm doing it wrong because nobody else has to not feed their children in order to be able to declutter the front hall. They can just say, oh, I'll just declutter it after dinner. It'll be fine. But after dinner, my brain is shot. I've already had to control the impulse to declutter. I've had to make all of these decisions. I've had to answer all of these questions from my kids. I've probably answered 12 emails. And now, like, I don't have anything left to go and make those decisions in the front hall anymore. So it isn't an option to just do it in another hour. And
so you're willing to allow your hyper focus and you're like, it's totally fine. We'll get takeout. We know what we're going to do when this kind of thing happens. If you want to allow yourself to go down that track, and then it's all good.
Right. And it doesn't work if it's time to go to school. I'm like, you know what, guys, we're not doing school today because I feel like decluttering.
Right.
I mean,
you do make some choices.
You gotta pick your moments, but there are times when you can and times when you can't. And I think that is a gift people can give me. And that's, I think, one of the things that when you work with a decluttering coach is that they can help you figure out what works for you. They can just be that sounding board and that constant reminder that, no, you are doing this right. The things that aren't working, that's part of doing it right. That's simply a part of the process.
I think that's so good. So it's not like, this is not about like trying to make you fit, you're the round, was it the round peg in the square hole, or right?
Yeah.
Like you're
Either
not
way,
trying to make yourself fit into someone else's system. You're understanding, how do you work best? And then how can I like make my life accommodate that?
Right. And it's a compromise. I mean, we're not saying to our family, you know what,
Yeah.
I am no longer going to cook you dinner. Right. Or
Can we
I mean,
say that?
Ever.
maybe you can say that. I don't
Maybe
know.
if I feel like it.
Right. It's not that.
No.
It's just saying that, hey, now and then, this is what I need. And, I think that that's an okay thing to do.
Yes. I was thinking along that thought, something that people could, like my family could do and people around me could do, is to just be kinder. So something happened today, actually. Someone came in my house and was like, oh, it's really cold. And then they went and looked at my thermostat and said, oh, you have it really, you have it set way too low and it's never going to get that cold. And you could ruin the furnace and yada, 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 the air conditioning, I mean. But they weren't kind about it. So that automatically was making me, like, I actually had to pause and I had to do my own coaching and find something to be grateful for, because I was about to blow my top, because I was like, okay, well, I didn't know that. Like, you don't have to be so mean. And I think that sometimes we take things, especially me, we take it a lot more personally because we've been used to that. And we just want someone to make a decision, to be kind, or as Danielle says, pivot with us, like just work with it. And what I found working with clients is that I changed my approach the more clients that I worked on, and they may not have ADHD, but because I had some type A characteristics, and I would be like, okay, we made a plan. We discussed the plan. We have the plan on paper. Why aren't we working on the plan? And then I realized, oh my gosh, it's the exact same thing. So we can change the way that we think about a plan. So what I like to talk about now is you can come up with a plan. I highly recommend having a plan, going through the steps, asking yourself all the questions, putting it on paper. Attach yourself to the process of getting to the end goal and not the end goal. So you can focus on each step at a time. And if one step takes longer, or if you lose interest and you go into something else, you're still working, because we know, all three of us know, that working for 10 minutes, 30 minutes at a time is going to get us much closer to whatever our goal is than not starting at all. So the idea of thinking on the process and not the end goal has really helped myself and some of my clients. And I think that helps with decluttering, because then you don't get stuck thinking I have to do it all. And if I don't do it all and I don't do it perfectly, then why am I going to bother? Because decluttering sometimes, like for everyone, it's not always easy. And there's no timeline really. Like, we get to choose. You've taught me that. Like, that is the best teaching you've given me, Sarah, is that I'm in control. I get to choose. The fact that I can declutter a room in 1 hour or take a year doesn't define me as a person. It doesn't make me good at decluttering or bad at decluttering. It's just data.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And like, we could do a whole different talk on this, so I'm not going to go into it much, but I just wanted to say, like, I actually have really come to believe that decluttering more slowly is a significantly more valuable way to declutter. And that is not the way my brain works. Like, my brain, again, that hyper focus thing, like, I want to do it all at once. And it's not even just the perfectionism. It's just that, like, if I've decided I want to do it, I could work for 4 days straight and not take a break at all. I mean, like, maybe remember to eat, like, and I mean, I'd collapse, like Julie talked about with like, organized like a boss, like, but I could do that and it would feel amazing every single second of the time. But it's not actually as valuable. It's not as valuable for our brains. It's horrible for our bodies. And, but we don't learn from that process the same way we do from doing it a little bit at a time. The other thing I've learned from doing it a little bit at a time, which I do, and it's extremely successful, and I hate it every time I do it, every single time, but I do it anyway because I'm a grown ass adult, so I can do that. But is to, and this is the executive functioning thing, is to, say I have 15 minutes. So I have 10 minutes to declutter because I need 2 minutes to pull the stuff out and I need 3 minutes at the end to put things away. Because otherwise, just doing it in 10 minutes at a time doesn't solve that overwhelm problem. It just means that you're breaking the overwhelm into maybe an even longer overwhelm process. But if you do actually leave yourself time to put things away, then you might not see the progress right away, but you are making progress. You're guaranteeing that because you're not making a bigger mess while you're doing it. One other thing I wanted to just say about ADHD is ADHD brains are super motivated by things that they're interested in. And there are, if you are willing to think outside the box, there are so many ways to make everyday tasks more interesting. And, you can find tons of stuff like on Pinterest and all over the internet, but I have started just keeping lists. Like, my daughter and I are binging Gilmore Girls right now, which I somehow never watched when it was on, like in the 90s or something. And we love it, but I don't have massively hyperactive ADHD, but I can't sit still very well. I don't like to just sit and hold still. And so it actually makes it very hard for me to watch TV. And so I figured out, I'm like, there are like 12 different things that I don't care for doing that I can do while I'm watching TV that keep my hands busy. And I get those stupid things done. And I enjoy the show more because my hands were busy. It's like other people knit to keep themselves busy. And I'm not in knitting phase at the moment. But like, there's so many just little tiny things that we can do if we really stop and challenge the way that everybody else does it, right? The term everybody else is just not our friend.
Yeah.
It just isn't.
That's so true. Okay. That's so good. So you know what, ladies, I'm going to wrap it up at this point. I think we've gotten so much good stuff out here. This is fantastic. You all both have websites. We're going to link those up. You all both are one-on-one coaches, so people can reach out to you. Let's see, was it Danielle? You said you were going to have a resource available.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. So we'll include the link to that as well. And Julie, you're going to send.
I will too. Yep.
You do too. Okay.
Yes, it's on my website, but the link will get them to it. So perfect.
Awesome. Okay. So look out for those links. If you're watching this, if you have ADHD or if you kind of think you might, or if you really have a hard time staying focused and getting things done, you want to reach out and connect with Danielle and Julie. They're amazing. So much fun. Thank you so much for being here. I know this is a huge topic, huge topic for our audience. And I appreciate you guys being here. So much fun as always. So thank you so much.
Thank
you, Sarah.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everyone.